Now, Three Thieves by Anonymous. The problem with thieves today, said Ledos, is the lack of technique. I know there's no honor among thieves, and there never was, but there used to be some pride, some skill, some basic creativity. It really makes those of us with a sense of history despair. Imalin sneered, slamming down his flagon of grief violently on the rough-hewn table. Bvek, what do you want us to say? You asked us, what do you do when you see a god? And I says, stab the fetcher in the back. What do you prefer? We challenge him to a game of chits? So much ambition, so little education, said Ledos with a sigh. My dear friends, we aren't mugging some Nord tourist fresh off the ferry. The Cobbler's Guildhall may not sound intimidating, but tonight, when the dues collection is housed there before being sent to the bank, the security is going to be tighter than a Guama's ass. You can't just step at every back you encounter and expect to make it into the vaults. Why don't you explain specifically what you like us to do? Asked Garcia calmly, trying to keep the tone of the group down. Most locals at the plot at the Plaster Corner Club in Tel Arun knew enough not to listen in, but she knew better than to take any chances. The common thief, said Ledos, pouring himself once more grief, warming to his subject, sticks his dagger in his opponent's back. This may slay the target, but more often gives him time to scream and drenches the attacker with blood. Not good. Now, a good throat slashing, properly executed, can both slay and silence guard, and leave the thief relatively blood-free. And after all, after the robbery, we didn't want people seeing a bunch of blood-soaked butchers running through the streets. Even in Tel Arun, that's likely to warrant suspicion. If you can catch your victim lying down asleep or resting, you are in an excellent position. You place one hand over the mouth with your thumb under the chin, and then you use your other hand to slit the throat and quickly turn the head to one side so the body bleeds out away from you. There is a risk here of becoming blood-stained if you don't move the head quickly enough. If you're unsure, strangle the victim first to avoid the blood tends to spurt out in 3-foot jets when someone's stabbed while alive. A very good friend of mine, a thief in Gnisis, whose name I won't mention, swears by the strangle and slash technique. Simply put, you grab your victim's throat from behind, and while throttling him, you batter his face against the opposite wall. Then the victim is thus rendered unconscious. You slash his throat while still holding him from behind, and the risk of staining one's clothes with blood is practically non-existent. The classic technique, which requires less grappling than my friend's variation, is to place one hand over the victim's mouth and then saw through the throat in 3 or 4 strokes, rather like playing a violin. It requires little effort, and while there is quite a bit of blood, it all jets forward away from you. There is no reason when one knows one is going to be slitting some throats not to take some precautions and bring extra equipment. The best neck hackers I know generally carry a bit of wadded cloth to the aft side of their knives to keep blood from getting on their cuffs. It's impractical for this sort of assignment, but when you are only anticipating 1 or 2 victims, nothing beats throwing sack over the target's head, drawing the string tight, and then supplying the killing blow or blows. Imalin laughed loudly. Can I see a demonstration sometime? Very soon, said Ledos, if Garcia has done her job. Garcia brought out the map of the guild house, freshly stolen, and they began to detail out the strategy. The last several hours had been a whirlwind to all. In less than a day, the three had met, formulated a plan, bought or stolen the necessary ingredients, and were about to execute it. Not one of the three were sure whether confidence or stupidity were driving the other two, but the fates were aligned. The guild house was going to be robbed. When the sun set, Ledos, Garcia, and Imalin approached the cobbler's guild house on the east end of town. Garcia used her cashews of stone flour to mask their scent from the guard wolves as the three passed over the parapets. She also acted as the lead scout, and Ledos was impressed. For someone of relative inexperience, she knew her way through shadows. Ledo's expertise was demonstrated a dozen times, and the guards were of such a diverse variety, he was able to demonstrate all the means of silent assassination he had developed over the years. Imalin opened the vault in his unique and systematic method. As the tumblers fell beneath his fingers, he softly sang an old and dirty tavern song about the 99 loves of Boethia. He said it helped him focus and organize difficult combinations. Within seconds, the vault was opened and the gold was in hand. They left the guild house an hour after they entered. No alarm had been raised. The gold was gone, and corpses lay pooling blood on the stone floors within. "Well done, my friends, well done! You learned well," Ledos said, and he poured the gold pieces into the specially designed compartments in his tunic's sleeves, where they held fast with no jingling or unusual bulges. "We'll meet back at the Plot and Plaster tomorrow morning and split up the bounty." The group parted ways. The only person who knew the most covert route through the city's sewer system, Ledos, slipped in through a duct and vanished below. Garcia threw on her shawl, muddied her face, and to resemble an old fortune teller, and headed north. Imalin headed east into the park, trusting his unnatural senses to keep him away from the city watch. "Now I teach them the greatest lesson of all," thought Ledos as he sloshed through the labyrinthine tunnels of sludge. His guar was waiting where he left it at the city gates, making a laconic lunge of the chokeweed shrub to which it had been leashed. On the road to Vivek, he thought of Garcia and Imalin. Perhaps they had been caught and brought in for questioning already. It was a pity he couldn't see them undergoing interrogation. Who would break under pressure first? Imalin was certainly the tougher of the two, but Garcia doubtless had hidden reserves. It was merely intellectual curiosity. They thought his name was Ledos, and he was meeting them at the Plot and Plaster. The authorities wouldn't therefore be looking for a Dunmer named Satis celebrating his wealth miles and miles away in Vivek. As he prodded his mount forward and the sun began rising, Satis pictured Garcia and Imalin not undergoing interrogation, but sleeping in the good deep sleep of the wicked, dreaming of how they would spend their share of the gold. Both would wake up early and rush to the Plot and Plaster. He could see them now, Imalin laughing and carrying on, Garcia hushing him to avoid bringing undue attention. They would take a couple of flagons of grief, perhaps order a meal, a big one, and wait. Hours would pass, and so would their moods. The chain of reaction that every betrayed person exhibits: nervousness, doubt, bewilderment, anger. The sun was fully risen when Satis reached the stables of his house on the outskirts of Vivek. He reined in his guar and filled his feed. The rest of the stalls were empty. It wouldn't be until afternoon when his servants returned from the feast of Sanct Realms in Gnisis. They were good people, and he treated them well, but from past experience he knew that servants talked. If they began to connect his absences with thefts in other towns, it was only a matter of time before they would go to the authorities or blackmail him. After all, they were human. It was best in the long run to give them a week off with pay whenever he was out of the town on business. He slipped the gold into the vault in his study and went upstairs. The schedule had been tight, but Sethis had given himself a few hours to rest before his household returned. His own bed was wonderfully soft and warm compared to the dreadful mattress he had to use at the canton in Tel Aruhen. Sethis woke up some time later from a nightmare. For a second after he opened his eyes, he thought he could still hear Emmeline's voice nearby, singing the 99 Loves of Boethia. He lay still in his bed, waiting, but there was no sound except the usual creaks and groans of his old house. Afternoon sunlight came through his bedroom window in ribbons, catching dust. He closed his eyes. The song returned, and Sethis heard the vault door in his study swing open. The smell of stoneflower filled his nose, and he opened his eyes. Only a little of the afternoon sunlight could pierce the inside of the burlap sack. A strong feminine hand clamped over the mouth, and a thumb jabbed under his chin. Just as his throat opened and his head was shoved to the side, he heard Garcia in her typical calm voice. "Thank you for the lessons, Sethis." Nice story of Three Thieves. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think this is where this session ends. We will proceed the next time. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.